Girls, today in grammar we're going to look at adverbs that compare. And as I read along here, you can follow with me. It says you can use adverbs to compare actions. The ER form of an adverb compares two actions. The EST form of an adverb compares, three or more actions. Okay, so just like with adjectives, when we're comparing two things, we get ER. When we're comparing three or more, it's EST. And it's just the same thing we practiced with adjectives a little bit ago. So let's read a few examples. The first one says, Jeremy works hard. There's no comparison, so we just keep the base word. The second example says, Jeremy works harder than Tom does. So we're just comparing Jeremy and Tom, and that's why we get ER. And the third one, Jeremy works hardest of all the students. So comparing Jeremy and all the students, that's going to be three or more people total. And that's why we get EST. Next little section. Most adverbs that end in ly use more or most to make their comparisons. And again, most of them, not all, but most of them. So again, let's look at our sentences. The truck moved slowly, no comparison, so we just keep slowly by itself. We don't add more and we don't add most because there's no comparison. Second sentence, the truck moved more slowly than the car. So we have a car and the truck comparing two things, so we use more. And the third sentence, the truck moved most slowly of all, comparing the truck and all the other things. So we're at three or more things, so we use most. All right, refer back to these directions up here and explanations if you need to. But let's look at our problems 1 through 5. The directions say to underline the adverb that compares in each sentence. Sentence 1. Mrs. Alvarez sings loudest of all the employees at the bakery. Well, how does she sing? She sings loudest. She bakes faster than Mr. Lane does. How does she bake? Bake is our verb, and faster describes the verb. The bread dough, number 3, the bread dough rises most quickly of all. Our verb, our action is rises, and what explains rises? Quickly. And how? Most quickly. So you could underline both, but quickly there is our adverb specifically. Number 4, you must knead bread dough more carefully than other kinds of dough. So here we're comparing the bread dough. I'm not going to underline that. Sorry about that. Let me highlight that. We're comparing the bread dough with other kinds of dough. And how are we comparing that? We're comparing it more carefully. Finally, number 5, Mrs. Alvarez has been baking longer than you have. Okay, so baking is our verb. What word describes how she's baking? Again, we're comparing Mrs. Alvarez and you. She is baking longer. Number 6, circle the correct word in each parentheses to complete each sentence. Now here we'll need to find the right adverb. So we're paying attention to the comparison. Are we comparing two things or more than two things? So sentence number 6, the muffins bake blank than the cinnamon rolls. We're only comparing two things. Since we're comparing two things, we have an ER ending, and that makes slower our correct answer. Number 7, we're comparing Mr. Costa. Mr. Costa works blank of all the bakers. So Mr. Costa and all the bakers, that means more than one baker. It could be just two, but then you have at least two bakers and Mr. Costa. So we're having more than two people, and in that case, then we need to use EST, fastest. Mr. Costa works fastest of all the bakers. Number 8, of all the workers, Tony sings how? Okay, all the workers, that's plural, plus Tony, so we're at least 3, probably more. So of all the workers, Tony sings most cheerfully. Number 9, Mr. Costa mixes sweet rolled dough blank than Tony. Only comparing 2 people. So Mr. Costa mixes sweet rolled dough more rapidly than Tony. We're only comparing 2, so we use more. And finally, the sweet rolls, plural, are done blank of all. Oh my goodness. So we're comparing a lot here, right? Not just 2 things. So the sweet rolls are done soonest of all, EST. All right. Again, when you're only comparing 2 things, it's either ER, let's see if I can find that in here. It's either ER or more. When you're comparing more than 2 things, you're comparing a lot of things, then we're using EST or most. That's the simple rule to remember. All right. So hopefully you did well on your work on this page, and we'll practice again tomorrow. That's all I have for you today. This is Mr. P, and I am out.